The Miami Hurricanes will be front and center at ACC Media Days tomorrow. Here are the questions Mario Cristobal needs to answer.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, writer for allhurricanes.com and co-host of Locked On ACC. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sport stops sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On this loaded episode of Locked On Canes, as you guys can see, for those watching, I'm on location here at the Hilton Uptown in Charlotte, ACC Media Days. Miami will be here tomorrow with head coach Mario Cristobal, quarterback Cam Ward, star linebacker Kiko Maui-Noa, starting left tackle Jalen Rivers. And I want to know from you guys, and I'm going to read some of your questions. I'll give some of my answers on what Mario Cristobal needs to address tomorrow. We're also going to talk on this episode about the ACC commissioner, Jim Phillips, yesterday, fired up as I've ever seen him, talking about defending the league from these legal disputes by Florida State and Clemson. And I do want to talk about Miami's running back depth chart heading into this coming season, because there's a luxury of depth in that area and certain others. But guys, I put out the bat signal, so to speak, on our Locked On Canes X account to hear from you guys. If you could ask one question tomorrow to Miami Hurricanes head coach Mario Cristobal, who will be available to the media, what would that be? Before I get to you guys's, let me give you some of mine. Things that I would love to know from Cristobal. First of all, I want to ask Mario, what makes, heading into this coming season, what makes this group of 85 players, that's 85 scholarship plus walk-ons, what makes this different from the Miami teams of the past 2 years? Obviously, we've had good players come through here. In fact, you just lost two great safeties and Cam Kinchins and James Williams to the NFL. But if you're talking about the best collection of talent, clearly that Mario has had in his now third year at Miami, I think this is the one. But what makes this group different? What makes this group different in terms of being mentally strong, closing out games, all that stuff that separates a 7-6 team from what we hope can be a 10, 11, 12, or who knows, win team this year? I would also, I don't know what kind of an answer I would get on this, but I would be curious to know how Mario Cristobal feels about this roster compared to any of the rosters he had at Oregon in his 4 years as head coach there. Because Miami has added, obviously, impactful transfers, the Cam Wards, Damien Martinez, Meesh Powells of the world, and Mario's recruited sensationally well for the last couple of cycles, bringing in a top 10 class and a top 5 class. Is this as talented or even more talented than Cristobal teams over in Eugene, where he did win 2 Pac-12 championships in his 4 seasons at the helm there? I would like to know that. I would love to know from Cristobal how he feels this particular team and this coaching staff. We're going to get into questions about that. How is this team now better equipped to play up to their talent level and to close games out in clutch situations? I would love to know from Cristobal if he feels this particular team is more disciplined than the teams of the last couple of years when it comes to avoiding costly penalties, those unsportsmanlikes, when it comes to taking care of the football and not being upside down in the turnover margin like they were last year. And I would also, and I will tomorrow, quite frankly, this may be the first question that I ask him, I will ask Mario Cristobal how he feels Miami's transfers, how these guys are gelling together with the returning players from last year. Because some of Miami's most important transfers this year were additions that were made after spring football. They had the luxury of having Cam Ward here before and during spring football and some of the others, but Damien Martinez at running back, Sam Brown at receiver, Simeon Barrow and Tyler Barron on the defensive line were not here for spring football. So they've had some offseason work. Most of these guys were arriving around May and June. They've been going through the weight and conditioning program, the strength and conditioning program, I should say, and they've been doing some workouts with teammates. So I would love to know how that group is gelling together. But let me get out to you guys here. So I put it out today on the Locked On Canes X account. And by the way, if you follow Locked On Canes, we will follow you back. If you could ask Mario Cristobal one question about the upcoming season, what would it be? So some of the responses here. Audie says, hey, are we going to play with tempo this year? I think so, and I hope so. And that's a question that I would not only ask Cristobal about, but with Cam Ward being here tomorrow, I will ask Miami's quarterback how much tempo he expects the team to play with this year. Lauderdale Kane asks, hey, has there been an attempt to make any adjustments to progress and make better game day decisions? As you can imagine, that's a pretty common question coming in from you guys. BC says, it's first down, you're winning, and your opponent has no timeouts left. When is it safe to start taking a knee, he says. I feel like that's equally a math question as it is a football question. But listen, somebody will probably ask him, because remember, it's not just local media like me and Manny Navarro from The Athletic. He's been out here at ACC. There's going to be national guys here as well, and somebody's going to ask him about the knee, and someone's going to ask him about the game day decisions. There's no question about that. Phil asks from Mario, do you feel like the roster is ahead of schedule than what you were expecting for year 3 when you were hired? If I could put words in Mario's mouth, I don't think he would ever say ahead of schedule because he has such high standards for roster building. But I can tell you guys from being out there and covering spring football, especially the way Mario talks about Cam Ward and, players like Inez Cooper and Jalen Rivers heading into their 3rd year in Mario's strength and conditioning program, he seems more content than he's been over the last 3 years about the talent and the depth levels at Miami. So I don't know if he would ever say ahead of schedule, but he definitely seems happier with the talent level and the competition levels at practice than he's been at any point over the last couple of years. It's a great question. Richard S. asks, will you micromanage the game, or will you let your coordinators coach and call the plays? Obviously, you never want your head coach to micromanage. And I think in terms of your offensive and defensive play calling, the more talented your team gets, the easier those jobs are. So this is going to be heading into his 2nd year at Miami as offensive coordinator. This year is going to be a lot easier for Shannon Dawson than last year was, right? When you've got Cam Ward and Damien Martinez, and you've got another year with Restrepo and Jacoby George and all the new wide receivers Miami's brought in through recruiting and Sam Brown through the transfer portal, and having a really good offensive line, that's going to alleviate the play calling. 505 Kane says, which freshmen have impressed? And do you remember, these questions are from Mario, do you see any having an immediate impact? Now, again, I'll give you my answer. I think we all expect Elijah Lofton to have an immediate impact. Tight end number 9, true freshman. That dude was lining up everywhere in practice, and he was making plays every single day. I don't think he's going to be the only freshman that steps up this year, but Elijah Lofton is the one that's got to be on the tip of everyone's tongue. We get more of a statement than a question from Dr. Miami PhD, who says, win. That's it. That's the question. I yield the remainder of my time. Kane Dog 1 asks, what have you done to sharpen your game management skills, and will you consult with your staff on key decisions? I think that's a fair question, and if I don't ask it, and I will if nobody else does, somebody's going to ask him that question. And then Boom says, can we wear orange jerseys with orange pants for a game? I don't know about you guys, but that sounds ugly. Orange, I don't like the green on green when they wear that once in a blue moon. I don't think I'm a fan of orange on orange either. Orange jerseys on white pants, white jerseys on orange pants, green jerseys on white pants, rinse and repeat. It's not that complicated. I think that's the way Miami looks the best. We get one from our friend Hoodie Girl. Love Hoodie Girl. Would love to hear about the progress of the younger offensive linemen. We know 4 of the starters already. How's the battle for the 5th spot going? That is something I will definitely ask Cristobal, and I will ask Jalen Rivers that. In fact, I have asked Jalen Rivers that question, and we'll see. I mean, from where I sit, it seems like it's going to come down to Matt McCoy or Samson Okunlola for the starting left guard spot, and I think both of them are very good. Sampson, of course, a former 5-star recruit coming out of high school. I don't think you can go wrong either way. I think whoever wins that starting left guard job, the other guy is still going to play quite a bit, and whoever wins that job, I think the O-line is going to be in good shape, and hopefully you have cohesion, right? I mean, one of the things that I asked Jalen Rivers about was making sure he's comfortable lining up next to either of those guys, and he said absolutely he is. All right, still to come on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. I want to talk a little bit more about those game management questions that people have and what's going to make this roster different from last year. And somebody asked me about the running back depth, and I will break that down with pleasure because that's one of the more exciting areas on the field for the Miami Hurricanes this season. So you know what you want to do? We're only getting started, my friends. You want to keep it locked right here. We're live on location from ACC Media Days in Charlotte. Don't go anywhere on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, we're having a great summer on FanDuel. We're winning money. We're having a blast. Major League Baseball going on left and right. I've been betting on UFC fights and boxing. There's been international soccer. You've got MLS soccer going on right now. Folks, all I have to do is go on to FanDuel.com. They let me keep the sports going whenever I want. I open up the app and I dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. You can get Miami plus 450 to win the ACC this year. You can get Hurricanes over or under 9.5 wins, depending on how bullish you are on Miami being potentially a double-digit win team this coming season. You can find all of that on FanDuel. FanDuel is hooking up all customers this summer with a booster bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. And for the everydayers, if you want to take your everydayer experience to the next level, make sure to sign up and become a Locked On Canes insider. I include a link in the show description below. When you become a Locked On Canes insider, you get text messages directly from my phone to yours with breaking news, recruiting scoops, show updates, one-on-one questions and answers. Try it free for 14 days. Click that link below. Try it free. Then if you like it, after 2 weeks, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. We give you a lot of added value on there on the Locked On Canes Insiders chat. In fact, we're going to answer questions on this episode from Locked On Canes Insiders. Our guy BP says, hey, selective energy is something that Miami has struggled with for over a decade. In particular, at the beginning of games. What is something you believe will change that this year to give us fans hope that we won't be watching an unenthused, sluggish product again? Okay, I like the way you term that phrase, selective energy. And to me, I think that comes down to as much of a mental thing as it is a physical thing. And obviously, you always want your guys to be better conditioned, in better shape, staying healthier. That's a big part of it. Consistency of, not having too many guys go down to injury. But honestly, like when you've had Miami repeatedly over the years, this is something we all want to change. Go out there and on occasion lose to teams that they are better than and more talented than. Find a way to lose these games. Like you said, inconsistency is the way I've put it, or selective energy is the way you put it. I think the more competitive and the stronger your locker room gets, I think I'm going to go back to comments that we talked about on the show that were made by Hurricanes offensive lineman Inez Cooper. Inez talked about shedding the negativity, talked about having, a couple or a handful of players that were on the team last year who were super negative, and it was rubbing off on other teammates, and it was ruining the energy, ruining the mental focus. Hopefully Miami has now found the right mix, and you've got guys all out there who believe in the U, who believe in Mario Cristobal, who believe in competing. And honestly, I think that's going to help a lot with the selective energy. And another part, like, it's not all selective, right? Because you also need to be better conditioned, and you need your roster to be deeper. Because sometimes what you think and what I think sometimes are players taking plays off and dogging it could also be the fact that, maybe you're down to a second stringer at a certain position, and there's a big drop off from the first stringer to the second stringer. I mean, you look at a couple of years ago and really over the last couple of seasons, both Miami has had, injuries at running back where their depth has been tested. A couple of years ago, they had injuries at the offensive line. They didn't have any depth there. It affected the entire team. You know, you had a quarterback who threw a lot of interceptions last year, and you did have to start your second stringer a couple of times last season. So all of that, I think improving your depth and improving your talent level can help that as well. I think most of this is mental, but some of it is physical, BP. And also, if your team is deeper, you know that anyone who's not taking practices seriously, anyone who's dogging it and being selective with their energy, you can more easily replace those guys. So that's another thing that comes into play there. So honestly, if you have a strong locker room and a unified message, and you've got more, ballers on the field that can rotate in for one another, I think that's going to help your selective energy problem. We get a question about, this is good. How do we see the running back depth chart shaping up? And any update on when Mark Fletcher is going to be healthy? He says, is Ajay Allen ready and looking as good as advertised? I can't speak for any of these guys in terms of their health, but I think Ajay Allen's absolutely fine, because when he missed spring, my understanding was it was more of a minor injury for him. Obviously, Fletcher was a semi-serious foot injury that he suffered in the bowl games. I think Ajay Allen is fine. As far as Fletcher, I have some optimism that he's going to be ready to go week one. Now, I know Miami's training staff is going to be very cautious with him, and he's going to be very cautious with his injury. Foot injury, reportedly a Liz Frank. It's a serious thing. You have to be careful with that. So he's going to be super cautious. But based on the conversation that I had with Fletcher 5-6 weeks ago on the show, and based on some of the rhetoric that I hear coming out of Miami, I think Fletcher's going to be ready sooner rather than later. So here's what I'll say about the running back depth chart. Nothing's for certain, because, your new top running back hasn't even, he wasn't here for spring, hasn't gone through a fall camp, but I suspect Damien Martinez is your starting running back. You look at how good he's been the last couple of years at Oregon State. He's a stud. I think Damien Martinez is running back 1. Assuming full health, I would say Mark Fletcher is running back 2. And then beyond that, guys, I think you're going to be riding the hot hand a lot. And I think it's going to be game by game, situation by situation, because I could make an argument for Ajay Allen being running back 3. I could also make a strong argument for Chris Johnson being running back 3. And he was here for spring, Chris. He was healthy for spring, and he was the starting running back for most of that time. And he adds a speed element that I don't know if there's anybody on the team who's as fast as he is. Certainly nobody on the team who's faster than CJ is. So Chris Johnson adds that extra element. And then, you listen, the true freshmen will probably kind of work their way up throughout the season. I mean, Fletcher did that last year. Fletcher was not a top 2 running back until he kind of caught his footing, a few games into the year. But Jordan Lyle, I understand, has been really strong during the offseason program, and Chris Wheatley-Humphrey looked pretty good in spring. So beyond the top 2, right, I can tell you Damien Martinez, Mark Fletcher when fully healthy. Beyond that, I think we're going to have to let this play out during fall practice. And I think game by game, hot hand situations, because sometimes you're going to want a speedster back there more often than not. I think the situation's going to work itself out. And as far as running back goes, I think it's been, you guys do the math on this, I think it's been about, I want to say 23 years since Miami has had a running back room this deep. So knock on wood, everybody stays healthy and they all live up to their very high expectations that I have for them. We get a question. One of our insiders wants an update on the ambassador, Judd Anderson. How is he progressing this offseason? I sense he has something that none of the others have. I'll be honest. I haven't. I do remember seeing one offseason update, I think from D Money on Canes Insight, that said Judd is doing well, like in the summer program and progressing, which doesn't surprise me because I know how hard that young man works. I did watch him in spring, and obviously just given the experience level, he was behind the other guys, right? I mean, Jakari Brown was still here. Cam Ward, of course, was the top dog. Emory Williams, Reese Poffenbarger. So, like, Judd was behind those guys, but it's just because he's, essentially a high school kid who enrolled early. Physically, he's impressive. 6'7", and he doesn't move like a typical 6'7" guy. Like Judd, he's got a basketball dual sport background. He moves very well. He's not the statuesque 6'7" that a lot of quarterbacks of that size are. He moves very well for his size, and he's got a good arm. Like the arm looks good in person. So, I think he's going to redshirt this year. I think that's logical for him. In fact, you might also have Emory Williams redshirt this year. I think Reese Poffenbarger will probably be the backup quarterback this season, but Judd, from everything that I hear and from what I saw during spring, Judd Anderson is progressing well, and I expect nothing less from him. Oh, man. All right, so we got a question about how Miami is a player-led team, and I do have something to say about ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips. He's not going to make it easy for Florida State and Clemson to get out. If anyone thought FSU and Clemson were just going to waltz over to the Big Ten and that they're going to part the Red Sea for Miami and UNC and Virginia and NC State, whoever wants to leave, they're going to open up the floodgates for everyone to fall. The ACC is going to fight tooth and nail to keep their current 17-team group together. They're not going to give up anytime soon. And I'm not going to give up either. You guys want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. And thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch today. We love this Locked On network, and Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. It's called Locked On Sports Today, and it's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. We get a question from my guy, ND Hater 85. And this same question was asked by Steve from Port Orange and a few others. He says, hey, I'm sure you've said this, but when does fall practice begin? Actually, guys, I don't think I have said this on the show before because the date has not been officially announced by Miami yet, but I've heard July 31st, which is 8 days from now. July 31st is when fall practice is going to open, and then from that point, guys, it's going to be like a tornado between fall practice starting, and they call it quote unquote fall practice. July 31st is not going to feel like fall out there on Green Tree, but between practices opening on July 31st and then your first game in the swamp on August 31st, that 30-day stretch is going to absolutely fly by. So you're going to have a whole lot of work to be done. A whole lot of sweat is going to be going on Green Tree between July 31st and August 31st. And I'll be out there covering practices, and I'm going to enjoy every second of it. I can't wait. Hopefully they practice indoors enough that I can be in the air conditioning, because I don't want to be out there in the July 31st heat outside. We get a question from Hurricane Keys, who says, hey, my question is, with this team being a player-led team, what gives you the confidence that they will perform in clutch situations when in the past that has not been the case? Even with the new transfers, other than Powell, we don't have a lot of experience either. I guess if you're looking for guys who have like played in a championship game, I guess Meesh Powell coming from Washington is the only one who's done that. And by the way, what he's talking about with the player-led team, it wasn't me who originally said that. For those who are the real everydayers, if you remember the interview that we did several weeks ago, courtesy of Canes Connection with Cameron Bobby Pruitt, I asked Bobby, what are the team goals this year? And the first team goal that he told me was, we want to be a player-led team, right? Which is the way it used to be, like in the old days when Miami was winning national titles, like, you know, guys like the Michael Irvins and the Ray Lewises and the Ed Reeds, they were policing the locker room. Guys were holding each other accountable. That's always the way it should be. And that's one of the stated team goals of this group this year. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're talking about, you know, not fading in clutch situations, obviously part of that is on coaching. When it's time to take a knee, you take a knee. We all know that. We can't say that enough. But a big part of that as well is executing your plays, not giving up, holding your blocks, securing the football, you know, not fumbling, not throwing interceptions in key spots, which we've seen so much of at Miami the last couple of years. And, you know, you would think if you've got a player-led team and they hold each other accountable for that, and also you've got a team that stays focused on the mission and the goals no matter what. Because that was one of those things that Inez Cooper talked about, is shedding the negativity, not having those Debbie Downers on your roster anymore. He was saying that, you know, those guys, whoever they were, he didn't name names, but whoever they were, have moved on to other programs. Not having that on your roster anymore, you would think that if everyone stays focused and optimistic and they play for each other, then, you're not going to have those situations. Are you going to win every game? Not necessarily, but at least you're going to be in a position to close things out in clutch situations if you're playing for each other and holding each other accountable. By the way, we get this question, and I'm going to go into this later on this week because I have filled out my ballot. I have filled out and submitted my ballot. I get asked this question: can you give us your predictions of your ACC rankings by the end of the year? I will. Spoiler alert, I have Miami in the top 3. I'll say that. I'll reveal exactly where I have Miami. And actually, I ranked every team in the football conference 1 to 17, and I will reveal those later on this week. I will also reveal my first team all ACC ballot because I filled that out here at ACC Media Days. So you want to make sure you check that out. So Miami fans are always asking me, and Florida State fans and Clemson fans as well are always asking about the situation with conference realignment. All I can tell you is what the commissioners are saying and what reliable reporters are saying, not the burner accounts out there who have their theories on who's going where. Everyone's going to the Big 12 or everyone's going to the Big 10. So not only are ACC Media Days happening this week, Big 10 Media Days opened up today in Indianapolis, and Commissioner Tony Petitti said, now they've just added 4 teams, that they are focused on their current 18. And with the 4 new members that they added, he was sure to mention, we've added these AAU institutions. Those are designated research institutions, which the Big 10 typically holds that as a prerequisite for entry. Florida State does not have an AAU designation, neither does Clemson. So you have to wonder, how deliberate were those comments from Petitti? Was he hinting that, hey, we just let in 4 AAU schools. We're not in the business of not letting AAU schools in. But he also said that we're focused on our 18. So the SEC commissioner, Greg Sankey, said something very similar last week, that they're focused on their current membership. They're not thinking about further expansion anytime soon. So there's that. How are the legal cases going? Florida State and Clemson are both suing the ACC. Commissioner Jim Phillips spoke on Monday. And, for those who have watched his press conferences over the years, typically very vanilla, typically very boring. But Phillips, he got animated when talking about the lawsuits, the legal disputes, as he referred to them, animated in a way I've never seen him before. And he said and of course, the legal team for the ACC, wow, it's thundering like crazy out there in Charlotte. Jeez, that is some terrible weather out there. I'm glad I'm here inside the hotel staying dry. But Phillips said he will fight for as long as it takes to protect his conference and his members. And folks, you got to remember, the ACC really has no, they've got no interest in settling anytime soon, and certainly no interest in losing these court battles, because if they were to settle, because I know a lot of Florida State fans and Clemson fans are like, well, they want to get out, just let them out. Why don't we settle? Just, make them pay a reduced buyout fee. Let's just close the book on this. I mean, if the ACC settles on terms that are favorable for Florida State and Clemson, you might create that parting of the Red Sea where others can follow them out the door. So the ACC will continue fighting. They'll continue protecting their grant of rights. And folks, I don't know who's going to win and who's going to lose, because honestly, Florida State and Clemson have had some strong arguments. The ACC's got a really strong argument because Jim Phillips pointed this out. Florida State and Clemson, they signed the grant of rights not once but twice. They signed that agreement, in his words, happily. I don't know, I'll take him at his word for that. They happily signed that agreement in 2013 and then in 2016. But now suddenly that the landscape has changed, and that agreement that they happily signed no longer gives them the type of payout that, the Big Ten and the SEC are now enjoying. Now they're unhappy. Now they're moving the goalposts. And Phillips, he talked at length about how damaging these legal disputes are for the reputation of the conference and how distracting it is for all the student athletes and stuff out there. So bottom line is, I got this not only from Jim Phillips's words, but from his demeanor. He is going to fight tooth and nail, and he has instructed the ACC's lawyers, who are fighting in court, regularly with Florida State and Clemson, to fight this tooth and nail to make sure the ACC does not let these guys out for a penny less than it's going to take to get out. So, and again, I know I'm just giving you the updates because I know a lot of Miami fans are like, well, I want out. And maybe if they get out, we can follow them out the door. It's going to be a long process. You know, I've talked about this repeatedly with Kenton Gibbs on Locked On ACC. It's a matter of when, not if. At some point, Florida State and Clemson are no longer going to be in the ACC. It's just a question of how long it's going to take. I think it's going to be years, 2-3 years down the road before they get out. And then the bigger question is how much will they have to pay to get out? Because that's the precedent the ACC wants to make sure that they're not going to let them out at a discount, not if they can help it. So that's what we're watching out for. But folks, I appreciate the interactions today on what you would ask Mario Cristobal if you could, you know, be face-to-face with him tomorrow. I'm looking forward to asking Coach some questions. And by the way, I think Mario's doing a fantastic job. This is the most talented Miami roster on paper in about as long as I can remember. Seriously. And Cam Ward is going to be here tomorrow. He's been an absolute leader and a godsend for this program since he's been here. Jalen Rivers has been a consummate professional heading into his 5th year as a collegian now. And Kiko Mauinoa, arguably the best player on the team last year. Say arguably because Xavier Restrepo had a really good year last year. Ruben Bain had a really good year. But Kiko, with his 7.5 sacks, 18.5 tackles for loss, a safety that should have counted but didn't count because the ACC officials, Kiko's going to be here, and I look forward to talking to all these young men and to talking to Coach Cristobal. So, guys, make sure if you're watching us on YouTube, you subscribe. You hit that like button, subscribe to Locked On Canes. If you're listening to the audio version, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. And yeah, tomorrow we're going to be loaded. We're going to have conversations on our episode tomorrow with Coach Cristobal, with Jalen Rivers, with Cam Ward, and with Kiko Mauinoa. So you want to tune in for another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.